Hi everyone, I'm back again with another video of my 52-week project. This is week 10, and this video is probably going to be a little bit longer than some of the other ones. I might actually have to go into time-lapse for it. We'll see how it pans out, but I'm expecting it to be a fairly long video, so try and bear with me. I'm going to start off by opening this image here of it's an X-Wing fighter. My son had went out to Bryant Park, and for Christmas he picked this up from a sculptor. I don't know the sculptor's name, the artist's name I should say. I don't know his name, but I will look into it again. I know I have his card around here somewhere, but this is made up of all like spare parts and metal parts, and as you can see, like this piece of a bike chain right there, and looks like a screw up in the front, and just different odds and ends and little pieces of scrap metal that he put together. I thought it was pretty cool. So we'll jump right into this then. Open it up in Camera Raw, and first thing I want to do is try and get this a little bit brighter. I like to see some of the highlights here, so I'm going to move up exactly what I said, highlights. I'm going to raise that up and go fairly bright with it. Around there, pretty good highlights on that. Raise up the shadows as well, so we can see a little bit. A little preview before and after with that. Let's see, raise up the blacks a little bit too here. I don't want to do too much because I don't want to see the background back here, but we will have to fix that later on. Looks good around there. Add a little bit of contrast to it as well. Let's see how that looks. And it brings it up a bit. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. As you can see, it's all a bunch of little parts. I definitely will look up the artist's name and maybe post it in the comments. Alright, next thing I want to do is lighten this area up over here with the wing and maybe a little bit under here. I want to be able to see that a little better. So I'm going to create a adjustment brush, which is here. And looks like the settings were already in here from before, but I'm going to keep it around 1. Basically, that's like one stop, adding one stop to the image here, to the exposure. I'm just going to paint in on this wing here. I just want to be able to see the wing a little clearer here. Paint under this wing as well. Just bring that out a little bit. I know a lot of my images of late have been a little bit on the darker side, and I mean that in a luminance sense, not any other way. I'm going to paint on here a little bit too. Everybody seems to be working pretty hard on this. It's a little bit delayed as I draw on there. Okay, and I think that should be good. Click on and off on that. You can see what I had actually done. I don't know how well that's showing up in the video. Okay. And I'm going to open this up as a smart object by holding the Shift key and hitting Open Object. And that's going to open up in Photoshop as a smart object. And don't know why my grid is showing there. Let's hide that by hitting Control H. That shows and hides. I'm sorry. That hides everything. Grids, guidelines, things of that nature. That'll hide all that stuff. Okay, what I want to do here is get rid of this line that's trailing in across the back here. That's actually caused from the board that I had. The ends were a little folded up on it, so kind of made it look that way. So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, new blank layer, and you can do that by hitting the new layer icon down at the bottom here, or going to layer new, the menu up top here, and or hitting the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to take the healing brush and with the new layer selected and making sure that the current layer and below is also selected on here and sampled is clicked. I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key and sample right below this little line here. And I'm just going to paint on it. And I think that might be a little too light. Let's see. Try that again. There we go. I'm going to make my brush just a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to sample again from underneath and then paint. And same thing. Sample and paint. And I went a little too close there, so Control Z, I'm going to do that again. I'll stop right there. And then sample, paint, not too worried because I'm going to get rid of this whole thing here. So sample, paint, and yes, it's a little repetitious, so I'm sample, paint, and continue all the way on. It looks alright. Let's see. Back off and take a look at it. I'm not worried too much about these little tiny marks here because we're creating a little star field in the back there, so that's really not much of a concern. What I want to do is get rid of the little post that's sitting here, so I'm going to zoom in on that. And I'm going to use the spot healing tool. I guess, you know what, first I'm gonna try the patch tool first and see how well that works. Making sure that content aware up top here is selected. The adaptation, I'm just going to leave for medium right now, but make sure sample all layers is clicked. So this all happens on a new layer because you can't use it on a smart object. So what we do is draw a circle around the area that I want to fix. And then back off a little bit. Click and drag it to a new location. It's blank area here. And Photoshop works its magic. I think that came out pretty good. Deselect it. And try and do the same thing over here as well. I don't know how well it's going to work because it is pretty close over here, but just going to draw around. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but like I said, we'll try. Pull over to an area. And it seemed to work out pretty good. Deselect that. And then that we can leave. It kind of looks like part of the ship over there, so we're not too concerned about that. But I'll go back and use the healing brush again and sample an area, paint, and paint. Try and get as close as possible. I don't know if you hear that noise in the back, but that's the dog playing with her bone. She's making an awful lot of noise. Apologize for that. And that's not looking too good. I'm not liking that. Sample again. Try and get in close to it. But that's not too bad. Alright. And I'll do the same up top here. I don't really like how that looks. Let's try the patch tool there again. I'm just going to select this area. I don't want to touch that edge, because in the patch tool I'll try and generate that little area there too. Try and blend it in with this area here. So I think that looks alright. We'll probably fix this little tiny bit here with the clone tool. Make the brush real small. And click there next to it and just draw. No wonder why it's only on current layer, so I'm going to make sure current layer or below or sample all layers is checked. And there we go, that worked out. I'll do the same thing up top over here. There. That looks much better. Like I said, I'm not worried about that. You can fix it, but it's going to be a star field back here, so it's not such a big deal. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I think that looks good for now. So I think what I want to do is bring in our little planet. Let's go into regular bridge, and this is the image I wanted to pick up. Okay, so I'm going to open that up inside Camera Raw, and I'm actually going to go really heavy on this because what I want to do is make a selection. So I'm going to raise the exposure on this way up want to get this really bright, but because I want to try and make a lot of contrast. But I don't want, too much light over in this area, so it's going to make it difficult to select. So I'm going to add a little contrast to it. A little bit more lightness. I think that looks good. Okay, and you could open this up as a smart object. You know what? I think I'll do that. Best bet is to always, operate in a non-destructive manner. Excuse me. Like I said, always best to operate in a non-destructive manner. Alright, so I'm going to go into the channels panel here, and we're going to look at each channel, try and get one that's clean with a lot of contrast in it. And to me it looks like it's the green channel. Remember, white is what we're selecting and black is what is deselected. So I'm going to duplicate the channel, clicking it and dragging it down to the new layer, new channel icon, and just dropping it on there, which creates a new channel. And now I'm going to go into levels, and just by hitting Control L, and I'm going to try and make a lot of contrast in here by sending the blacks to black and the whites to white, and without cutting into the image too much and losing too much information on the edges here. I'm going to bring my white in, which made it nice and white. Around there, and then bring the blacks up to turn this black. There we go. So we have a really good basis for a selection as of now. I'll bring that back a little bit. That's pretty good right around there. And then hit OK. And then I'm going to get the polygonal lasso tool, which you can get to by hitting L. As you can see, as the tooltip shows it. And then I'm going to click all around my little sprocket here. Try and get pretty close. This way I can fill everything else in with black, and it reduces the amount of work that I have to do. And double click. Alright, now I want to invert the selection. So you hit Control, Shift, and I will invert your selection. And then since my foreground color is black, I'm going to hold the Alt key and hit backspace, which will fill the entire selection with black. And we pretty much have our selection here. It's got a little bit of work to do on it. So now I'm going to deselect, Control D, and I'm going to zoom in on it. Center that on the screen. And I'm going to move my mouse out of the way here and get my brush, hitting B for the brush tool, and my foreground is set to black. I'm just going to look at my brush for a minute by right clicking and putting my hardness up to 100%, and then click, and then shrink the brush size down. I'm going to try and get in there as close as possible and just click. in there, in each section. And you can get really, really in depth here with creating the mask, and just depends on how accurate you want to be with it. I mean, a lot of this is going to be lost in the sky, or in the star field, I should say, when we actually do the image. But I like to try and get a pretty decent selection to start off with. And it's always nice to have something good to work with. I'm just going to draw around them a little bit there. Try and get as close as possible. Like I said, this could be a little time consuming. Okay, I want to make a little selection by clicking the circular marquee tool. I'm going to try and place it right here in the middle, as close to the middle as I possibly can. And by holding down Control and Shift and then clicking, it'll draw from the center and keep it constrained. I'll try and line up this edge right here. I'm holding the space bar in it, which allows me to move around the selection and let go of the space bar. Probably get a little bit bigger, and I'm going to move it over by holding the space bar again. Right around there is good, and then let go of the mouse. And then fill that with black by, once again, foreground color is black, so hold in Alt key and hit backspace, and it fills it with black. Now I just want to move my selection, so because this is the same size over here. So what I want, make sure that your selection tool is selected, and just click and drag it over to the next spot, and do the same thing. Control Alt backspace, and that will fill a selection. And I also want to make sure that this goes white around the outside here, so I'm going to invert the selection, Control Shift I, and I am just going to hit the X key, hit B to get my brush, and just paint with white right over that. You can go over some of these other areas too if you'd like. Okay, and I'm going to select my marquee tool again and move that selection. Control Z, sorry. Invert the selection again. Move it back over to here, and actually do the same thing I did with the other one. Get it right on that edge there. Almost got it. There we go. And invert it again. Brush tool, paint it with white. Okay. And now I want to select the marquee tool again. Deselect that, and I'm going to do the same thing around the middle section here. So click, drag, hold Shift and Alt, and try and get it as close as possible around this entire selection here. This center ring, I should say. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then just fill that with black. Now notice black is the background color, so what you do is hit Control and backspace, and it'll fill with the background color. Okay. And I'll deselect that. So we've pretty much got our selection going here. We want to make this a little bit darker, so what I'm going to do is take the Dodge and Burn tool, and that is the burn tool right there. So we want to burn our blacks in, and just paint over the blacks, and anything that's gray will go black. And just paint over the edges like that. And over here, depending upon what you have your exposure set to, is how quickly it'll actually burn it to what you want. I'm gonna actually raise it a little bit, put it up to about 80. Around that edge too, and over there. A little trick: if you hold down the Alt key while you have the burn tool selected, just holding down the Alt key will actually change it to the Dodge tool, so you can do that on the whites. But it's going to go with the same exposure setting, so keep that in mind when doing it. I'm not overly concerned with how this looks, because I'm going to be cleaning up these edges in another step. And that looks alright there. And now I'm going to go to the brush tool again and shrink our brush down to roughly the size of the tip here, these little sections, and then just paint with white in that section. And this is going to take a little while, so I may do a little time lapse here. Okay, I'm going to go back into the Dodge and Burn tool now. Just clean up these little edges here. I want to actually dodge these and push these edges to white. I'm just going to go over them a little bit. Like I said, you're doing selections. I mean, you can get really really close and make them perfect, but for what we're doing here, it doesn't have to be so precise. Okay, back off a little bit. As you can see, we got a pretty decent selection so far. Well, what I'm going to do is try and clean up the edges a little bit by going to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to blur the edges just a little bit, maybe a little less than that. That looks good. And now I'm going to run levels on it again by hitting Control L and bring up the levels dialog box. And bringing these sliders in will actually sharpen our edges and smooth them out. As you can see, they look pretty good right now. Bring this in a little more. Depending upon how you bring these in, as you can see, it's kind of expanding and contracting the edges here. So I'm going to bring this in pretty far. I don't want the edges to get jagged or anything, so I'm going to go to 100% so you can see what's going on. And bring this down just a little bit. There's some jagged pieces here, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. That's kind of inherent as to when I kind of came in a little bit on there, but that's alright. Like I said, it's going to be, for what we're using it for, it should be alright. And it's going to hit OK. Then we got our selection. Alright, I'm going to control click on this layer, and as you can see, it made the selection here. Hit the RGB, go back to my layers, and just hit Control J to put that onto its own layer. You can see that we just have our selection there. Now what I want to do is convert this into a smart object. Make sure the layer is selected. You can right click on it and go to Convert to Smart Object. And this is important because we want to make sure that we keep this linked to a file, because we're going to bring this into our other file that we have open with the X-Wing. So by keeping it as a smart object, when we resize it, we can resize up and down as much as we'd like without losing the quality, because it's always going to be linked back to this file. So what I need to do now is to right click this and go to Duplicate Layer. Now you see it says it has a little ellipsis, these 3 dots. Anytime you see that, it means there's a dialog box coming up. So I'm going to name this Moon, and then the destination is going to be the first file, which is V1055, and I'm going to hit OK. Now it doesn't look like anything happened, but jump over into the other file, you'll see it's here, and it's also a smart object. So what I'm going to do is try and clean this up a little bit. I'm going to convert this to a smart object as well. And it's working. There we go. And I'm going to go to V with the Move tool, and I selected the wrong layer. Select Moon, and then move the moon up to the top. Alright, I'm going to shrink it down now. Hit Control T, and this is where linking that to the other file, making it a smart object, is a big deal, because we can make it really small and say, oh wait, it's too small. Control T and make it larger again. And as you see, we didn't lose any quality. Now, if you did that with a regular JPEG or a regular file, you would have thrown away your information, and you would have never had the details still left in here when you resized it again. So I'm going to actually resize it to the correct size. And I'm holding the Shift key in to make sure that it's constrained to the right proportions, and I think that's around a good size right there. move it down a little bit. Alright. I kind of... let's see. Change the blending mode here. Try and blend it with the background a little bit more. So, not overlay, which completely makes it disappear. Pin light makes it look pretty good. Adds that little grungy effect to it. Kind of darkens it, but doesn't get rid of everything. So let's see. I kind of want to make it so it's a little rounded. So it's not like we're looking at it straight on. So I'm going to use a tool usually used to fix things in Photoshop and lens distortions, but I'm actually going to use it to distort it. It's a lens correction. And it's a big dialog box. You can see it shows the lens that I actually used to take the image. But I want to go into custom, and I want to change around the distortion and play around with it. As you can see, it's kind of like stretching it out a little bit. I don't want to do too much, just a little bit. Around there is pretty good. And I mean, you could play around with the other things in here, but I'm just gonna leave it as this. Hit OK, and I want to rotate it right now. Control T, and that's a warning, just saying that it's going to turn off the lens correction while I actually rotate this, but it'll come back after I hit OK. I turn it so the dark edge is to the right here, just like that, and then hit OK, and then my distortion is reapplied to it. Okay, I want to darken up and kind of make this thing look a little more round. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and go to the curves adjustment layer. And you can name it if you'd like, just call it darken. And then use previous layer to create clipping mask. I'm going to check that. So it links it just to this, affects only this layer. And now I'm going to click directly in the middle to lock down a point, so I'm not affecting any of the darks down over here. It's just the lighter areas in here that I'm going to affect. And I'm just going to drag a point right around there. I'll go up a bit. It's pretty dark there, but I'm really only concerning myself with this over in this area here. Let's go over into the mask, and I'm going to paint in here now. Get my pen, wherever I put my, there it is, and hit B, and with the brush set to black, I'm going to make it a little bit larger, and make sure it's a soft brush. Take my hardness off. I'm just going to paint on the end here. Looks like I got pressure sensitivity set on there a little bit like that. Let's go into my brush options here. And I'm going to turn shape dynamics on so I can use my brush. I think that looks pretty cool. Kind of like a little Death Star going there. Okay. And the final step would be the little star field. I actually have a little action that I had created, and which will generate the star field for me. So right over here, and I'm going to select my bottom layer, and I'll just press play, and it says be sure the background layer is selected or layers will not be placed into the group. I'm just going to hit continue because my background layer is selected, and it'll play through the action. And there's the star field. I'm not sure why it created two. I'll have to go back and look at that, but and there's the little star field, which is randomly generated. I'm going to go back in here and get rid of this one. I don't need that. Go into the gradient overlay again. I'm just going to lower that down just a little bit and hit OK, and then I'm going to create a mask on the folder here, and I'm just going to paint away with black, make the brush a little smaller, and I'm going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing, and just paint with black on here and get the color, get rid of the color that's on here. We don't want colors on this. It wouldn't look right with colors on here. The colors are actually just for the stars in the background there. Which looks like some of the stars actually showed up on the jet X-wing here. Because, you know, when you look up at the stars, you see random colors in the stars. You don't just see white stars. Some are twinkling, there are blues, there's yellows and reds, and all of those things are inherent in the sky when we look at it. So that's what I tried to capture with that. I'm also going to paint it on here too, just to make sure that there's no colors on that as well. And that's it. That is a little starfighter. I'm going to go to full screen here, zoom in, and there you go. That is our starfield. X-Wing Starfighter. That's my week 10. If anybody wants to know how I created this starfield, just let me know, and I could do a quick tutorial on how to create it and how I did it with an action. Alright, I'll see you guys next week.